Good morning, Gamecock fans. Today is Friday, September 19th, the year of our Lord 2025. This is Coffee with JC Shurburtt. Hope you all had a wonderful week. Still praying for Connor Shaw. Looks like he's hanging in there, um, doing about as well as can be expected. Of course, he had a health incident at a coaching his son's football game in Simpsonville earlier this week, and thoughts and prayers from the entire Gamecock Nation. Everybody that knows Connor certainly are still in effect. It's sort of crazy. Carolina's playing Missouri this weekend out there at night because that was one of his huge moments his senior year. Came off the bench. Carolina was struggling down 17 zip, and Gamecocks came back and won that one. Top five win on the road. One of the better, I guess, as far as wins go in program history, considering I think Missouri was actually, I believe, undefeated at the time, or with one loss. They were undefeated because they ended up only having the one loss to Carolina and won the division that year. But it was, it's been a rough week, folks. Just, I don't know, out here in the real world or in the real world outside of this, because this is certainly sports related. And so hopefully the game Saturday night gives everybody a nice escape. And hopefully the Gamecocks play their best football game of the year. They're certainly more capable of what they've been doing on the field through three games, particularly on offense. And the defense obviously could play a whole lot better than it did against Vandy. We've seen it, just a lot of disappointing performances all the way around, and some adversity that hit with Lenore Sellers going out. He's been upgraded to probable per the latest release. It's just one of those things. I think if as long as he's cool today and then tomorrow, and they'll continue to check that he's good to go. That's massive because I believe, and this is nothing against Luke Doty, but obviously, when you have a player like Lenore Sellers, it helps your causes. And Vegas has agreed with that point, that opinion, because the line dropped. It went from 13.5 to 9.5. And I'd be shocked if the money was loading up on Carolina. I think the money loaded up on Vandy last week, but I don't think that's the case this week. I think it's as those point spreads do when big time players, or especially a quarterback, are good to go or not, the line changes. It's 9.5, over under is 48.5. The Gamecocks and Tigers will kick off and renew the annual game for the Mayor's Cup at 7 p.m. Eastern on ESPN. So that's kind of the setup. The Carolinas won out at Columbia, Missouri twice since these teams started playing annually in 2012. Once was that 2013 game I talked about. The other was 2017. Both of those were evening kickoffs. The one evening kickoff loss was a very disappointing 31-28 loss against a not so good Missouri defense. Carolina couldn't get anything going offensively. Got some turnovers late to make it close, but had the momentum early and then lost it. Could not stop Tyler Beatty that night. And Missouri won by 3. And so that's the last time they played out there at night since that point in Como. Only the one game with Spencer Rattler in 2023 where Carolina wasn't going very far offensively that day, had more injuries, kicked 4 field goals, hung in there okay. I mean, 27-12, 2-score game, with all the adversity that hit. They dropped a touchdown pass at some point, but just was not meant to be. Missouri ended up 11-2 that year and beat Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl. So they were on a roll that season. Missouri plays really well at home, or did last year. They haven't been on the road yet. They won't go on the road till October this season. Interesting schedule, right? Um, Gamecocks are the SEC opener for them. The series, since it's been the Mayor's Cup, is 7-6 in favor of Missouri, but at one point the Gamecocks, after a wild 37-35 win in 2018, led the series 5-2. So Missouri kind of came back and won two, three, four, five in a row. And the Gamecocks snapped that streak last year in Columbia, South Carolina. The Gamecocks have struggled to stop Eli Drinkwitz's offense all but maybe twice since they've been squaring off against him. Um, in 2017, he was the offensive coordinator at NC State. They rolled up about 500 plus yards in the opener, but thanks to Debo Samuel and Jake Bentley's heroics and a defense that forced how many turnovers and had a late stand, the Gamecocks actually won that game 35-28. In 2019, he took the head coaching job at App State for 1 year, came to Columbia, beat the Gamecocks, but Carolina's defense actually played well that night, 202 yards for App compared to 374. They just had lots of issues putting the ball in the end zone that night, and App got a big win. It was kind of not a pretty game for the Will Muschamp Company. So yeah, then it started in 2020. Carolina's defense actually played pretty well second half. Remember, that's the game Mike Bobo's first game as the interim coordinator. Carolina got down 17-0, and then all of a sudden the defense stiffened. Doty did some things with his legs. Final was 17-10. After that, wow, just couldn't stop the run in 2021. 2022, Missouri couldn't stop them in the first half, adjusted, but then Carolina had, I guess, no plan, even with Spencer Rattler and all those receivers, no plan on offense to score points in the second half after Marshawn Lloyd went out. We talked about 2023. They really got after Carolina as far as deep passes and things like that. And then last year, Missouri went on 6 scoring drives against the best defense that Clayton White has had. So it's been a struggle to stop these guys. And after last week, where the defense faltered at times, you get a little bit concerned going into this football game. So there's that. And I'll come back to that in a second because I have some points to make. Will South Carolina win the game Saturday night? I can't pick that right now. And it's really just, I see a Missouri team that, despite not playing probably anybody as talented and fast and big and good and SEC-esque as South Carolina, they're clicking. And we hear that a lot. Shane Beamer talked about it, about the offense. They're clicking. Well, Missouri's clicking on offense right now. Has the defense been a little leaky at times? Yes. And I'll get to that in a second. About Missouri, they have an elite defensive line. The rest of it, let's just say there's some concerns from some Missouri people heading into this football game. Are they unfounded? Maybe, but maybe not. Maybe there's an opportunity there for the Gamecock offense to get going, as it's probably going to need to for Carolina to have a shot at winning the football game Saturday night. They call Missouri the Show Me State, and that's kind of the mantra this week. Show me how good of a team you can be, South Carolina, because it's I don't know. It's only September. We're only 3 games in. A lot of season left to be played, but a win here would go a long way toward kind of resetting everything, calming down people, getting more confidence in your players, moving forward, and getting ready for, in a couple of weeks, I think 3 weeks exactly, because you got Kentucky next week, then an off week, and then you go to Baton Rouge, Oklahoma comes in, Alabama comes in, then you go to Ole Miss, then another open date, then you're at A&M, which looks really good on offense this year, and then Coastal, and then the game with the Tigers, who are equally frustrated after 3 games with a record of 1-2 after losing to Georgia Tech last year. Now, I'll mention this real quick. Maybe it'll make you feel better. Maybe not. I don't know. I tend to kind of focus on South Carolina, but I did read a stat today where Dabo Swinney's 15-17 against teams with winning records since 2020. And look, I don't play the schedule thing. Clemson's won national titles. They've certainly beaten South Carolina their fair share of times. But the general debate about ACC, SEC is not a debate. And that stat should show you that. I mean, you get an opportunity to kind of work things out in the ACC. Now, you can't always, because you'll run into a Georgia Tech early that's playing well and that has one of the toughest players I've ever seen in college football playing quarterback. But or you open with LSU and they beat you. That's just one of those things. But there is an opportunity to kind of work things out sometimes because you're not necessarily going through the gauntlet. And then you throw in the fact the transfer portal's been a very NIL, all that's been a very big equalizer. Some of these programs, even South Carolina is an example of that. Under the old times, number one, I don't think Carolina would have been as good because some of the key pieces they got last year from the transfer portal, but you lose a lot of older players like that, like they did on the. I mean, you're not replacing those guys in one year through recruiting. You know, Transfer portal allows you to do that. Vanderbilt, what they need because they had a lot of players coming back. Well, they needed more weapons for Pavia. They needed to shore up some offensive line vacancies, and by God, they did it. And they basically raided New Mexico State for all of their success on offense. And Clark Lee's always been able to coach defense up there, but the offense is what kind of the straw that stirs the drink. And like you said, they're in position to where they can win every game if they play a certain way, if they play like they want to play their game, and that's how you win at Vandy. And so that's a harsh reality for a lot of programs because it's no longer let's just stack top five recruiting classes, and even if we're young one year, they're still really good, and we may skip a beat here and there, but we're going to be pretty good. No, it's all these teams have are within a touchdown of each other most weeks. Um, and so that's why you got to win in close situations. That's why you got to avoid having issues like you had last week. And that's why you got to just bring it every single week in the SEC. So that's good and bad for South Carolina. Beyond this year, it gives a program like the Gamecocks a higher ceiling, to be honest. I mean, you got to hit in the transfer portal. You got to continue to recruit and develop high school talent like they're doing, but you're not too far off because of personnel losses. Now, this year's team, I'm not saying they don't miss Kyle Kennard. Certainly, Judge Collier, who was a high school recruit, they're missing him right now in the secondary. I think obviously they miss Nick Eamon-Warre. Maybe Rocket Sanders a little bit. I hesitate to say that because I don't think the backs have had very much room to run, and I thought Rasul Faison did some really nice things the other night, but obviously he's not Rocket Sanders. Nobody is. Said that all off season. So, it's one of those things where if you look at the SEC in general, uh, there's beyond this year glimmers of hope. But we can talk about that all off season, right? And I'm talking big picture with that, not anything about right now. It's job, program, team. That's more of a program thing. Team wise, it's I mentioned this in sync, out of sync. Carolina's offense is out of sync. Needs to be a lot less predictable, obviously. Um, run, pass is not a great formula unless you're able to line up and run it for four, run it for three. You got a 3rd and 3. Then it's even tempting to run it again. So I don't know, but the NFL style, dot dot dot, boom boom boom, however you want to describe it. It's hard for me to kind of get into the words there. It doesn't translate into college football very often. Even at Alabama, where that was what Nick Saban sort of lived and died with for a while, it didn't work. He evolved. Lane Kiffin, Jalen Hurts. You look at Georgia. Todd Monken was an NFL guy, but also had a college background at Southern Miss. That was definitely an offense that used a lot of pro concepts, but with the way they did it, that's unlike anything I've seen. Some may say, well, what about Mike Bobo? That's a pro style offense, but he's always been in college. So I thought he did a really good job. He and Gunnar Stockton Saturday for University of Georgia, winning that football game up in Rocky Top. But it just doesn't always, it's the same sport, different game. And Chuck Oliver asked me this because he asked me about Mike Shula, and he said, "Well, I'll talk to somebody," and they're like, "Well, in college, offenses are all about attack, 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 put a bunch of points up, all that." He said, "Pro guys are kind of like, well, if we score 27 points and have 300 yards, it's a good day." And that's because up there, you have to kind of fight and hope for that because you have monsters and grown men all over the field on defense, no matter what team you're playing. In college, there are talent discrepancies in every single game, no matter how minute they may be. And you just take advantage of the matches. You get the ball in space to your athletes and you go. Because in college, there's never enough points, man. I was looking, I'd forgotten about this game when Texas A&M was up, what, 35 to 45 to 10, something like that, to UCLA. And Josh Rosen, who I ranked as the number one quarterback in the country one year, but he flamed out in the pros. Led UCLA back to season opening win. Kevin Sumlin was there. They were wanting to fire him. What was that, 2015, 16, something like that? So there's never enough points. You got to keep scoring. Now, running up the score is probably something that you shouldn't do if you got it. But, that's the difference. And, I think that the pro style guys are the guys that have called plays in the NFL that are successful with both. Either A, or like Jim Harbaugh, who's a freak who can do any. But if you notice, it took him a long time to build that Michigan offense to where he wanted it. And they didn't really throw him many passes with J.J. McCarthy. They just, they had such a great line of scrimmage and run game that there were very few teams, including Alabama, that were able to stop them consistently. That's how they did it there. You look at a guy like Steve Sarkisian, who was in the NFL with the Falcons. It was just okay, there. But Sark, got really in the zone in 2020 for Alabama, has been in the zone at Texas. They're struggling right now on offense. I don't think it's play calling. I think it's Arch Manning struggling at the moment because he's a young quarterback. But Sark also was in college football for a long, long time, working for Pete Carroll, Washington head coach at SC. Kind of has a BYU background, so those guys are few and far between who have made it work. I mean, I mentioned that Missouri defense, and defensively too, because I mentioned that Missouri Now Matt Patricia at Ohio State, that's a freak. That's a different guy. Brian Daboll, the one year he was the offensive coordinator at Bama, and of course Saban sets the guidelines or whatever. I don't think he did a bad job at Alabama. So there's been guys, but they're few and far between. I mentioned that Missouri defense. Steve Wilkes was the D coordinator that year out at Missouri and gave up. I mean, they played Josh Heupel's Tennessee, really, really good Tennessee team. It's 2021. Tennessee goes out there and hangs 62 on them. They couldn't stop the run. They couldn't stop the pass, whatever. Blake Baker was on that staff. He's now the D coordinator at LSU. They kind of got him involved later and then just gave him the job the next year. Their defense got a lot better. And I'm not saying that to say that the Mike Shula hire is over and done with and that's it. Sometimes adjustments have to be made. And I know fans, you look at the Marcus Satterfield situation, Dowell Loggins, who I think did a good job his first year under bad circumstances. And then last year, took it a while to kind of get going. There was obviously some questions early about usage and things like that. But then they kind of started clicking. And I thought a lot of, some of the touchdown passes and runs and things were really good play calls. I mean, the shuffle pass against Missouri last year. Good play call. Touchdown on 4th and 10 against Bama. Great play call. The Clemson touchdown runs by Lenoir. I think the play call was a pass. So I don't know. I don't know if he gets credit for that, but he kind of came into his own and obviously spent a few years back in college football, kind of learning some things. Has done a pretty good job at App so far. So, but the issues with Sat were a lot different than what they are with Shula. And keep in mind too, Marcus Satterfield only coached in the NFL for 1 year as an assistant to an assistant with the Panthers, coached offensive line. But yeah, it's one of those things. Like I said, I'm not coming down on Shula. I'm just saying that my hope is that the offense from a predictability standpoint, um, and execution and mistakes and all that kind of evolves, and teams evolve through the course of the year, and so that's the hope right there, especially on Saturday night. If Missouri's defensive line's controlling the football game, which they're capable of doing, and Carolina can't block, or they're leaving guys I mean, it's going to be a long night, folks. If you can't run the football at all, it's going to be a long, long night. So, that's the setup there. I do have, based on kind of looking at it and digging in, there could be some holes in this defense if Carolina can block and execute and, like I said, be a little less predictable. I don't know how great, and they may be great because it's not been, it hasn't been the murderer's row schedule wise of Missouri. I mean, there may be some holes on the back seven. Um, if the Gamecocks go out there and do what they need to do. Defensively, it's all about tackling, wrapping up. I mentioned this earlier. I'd get back to it. Clayton White said something about working on all this since January. He's Clayton White's a pretty good defensive coordinator. I think we'd all agree. Um, I think when you struggle to stop something like the outside zone for so long, and a certain offense, as a coach, you probably pay a little bit extra attention to it. And I think that you probably don't go out and just do the same. Now, defensively, you can have the best game plan in the world. And if your linebackers don't play their assignments or they get fooled or tricked, you're going to give up yards and points. So you can have the best plan in the world and it won't matter if you get blocked, that kind of thing. But something tells me, Carolina will have a good plan on Saturday night. The issues on defense are a lot different. It's up to the players. I mean, Fred Johnson, I don't think it was his best game at all against Vandy. And I don't know if he was just thinking too much because he's young or what, but he has to have a fantastic, go back to Virginia Tech form. Don't disappoint me, Fred Johnson. The other linebackers as well. It's going to be important for the Gamecocks to set the edge. Obviously, get off blocks on the interior, that kind of thing. And then the secondary, just in general, man, through 3 games, there's been some issues back there. They have to play a whole lot more physical. Last year in this game, Nick Eamon was very important because he would limit a lot of things that could have otherwise been big plays. The safeties have to step up. They have to cover a whole lot better. This isn't murderer's row receiving core wise, but they do have our man, I think Kevin Johnson's his name, from Mississippi State, who had a really big Kevin Coleman. I'm sorry, Kevin Coleman from Mississippi State, who had a really big year last year. He's caught 24 balls in 3 games. That's 8 per game. Norfleet, the tight end's really good. And Pribula is completing 76.4% of his passes and can run. So he's a tough, tough sucker. You know, I'd probably, if I were Missouri, and this is just through 3 games, they lost to Miller Moss to Louisville, who was the starter at Southern Cal. But this guy, I think for what they do, he's a better fit. Go figure. So, anyway, the matchups, and then we'll get out of here. It's and there's ways to do matchups. You always have the advantage who has the advantage. And I didn't do this for SC State out of respect because clearly South Carolina should have had an advantage at every position. Vanderbilt last week, I was just kind of into what do they need to do. I should have done that, and I'm sorry. But I'm going to get back to doing this for every opponent. Uh, Offensive line versus so we'll go Missouri O line versus South Carolina O line. That position, which who has the better receivers, who has the better this, and then we'll get into the actual matchups, which I think is more important, and then kind of a percentage. Because as I've always said, predictions aside, the scenarios are what determine, and there's kind of a percentage and odds on every scenario. So offensive line versus offensive line, Missouri 80-20, and that's just because the Gamecocks have not been playing all that well outside of Trevon Ball and Casey Henry. That's 3/5 of your offensive line that's been in question. So obviously that's it. So that's a 60 plus 60 margin. Tight ends, I love North. I'm going to go to push though, because at different times this year, Michael Smith is out, but Jordan Dingles had his best game the other night. Brady Hunt's made some things happen. Maurice Brown's a valuable player. So collectively, South Carolina, Missouri, it's a push. Wide receivers, I mentioned Kevin Coleman. I'm going to go 55-45 Missouri on this. Advantage Missouri head to head. But I'll say this. I think South Carolina's receivers have started playing well. Nick Harbor's playing better. Uh, there's been sort of a youth movement. A lot of younger guys playing snaps. Donovan Murph has been productive. Ventrevious Jacobs has been productive. They need those guys to play well Saturday night. Hopefully some yards after catch, especially Nick Harbor. He's such a weapon. You hated to see him catchless against SC State, but he came back, I think, and did some good things, really good things against the Vanderbilt Commodores. Should have had a touchdown, but they blew the whistle. So plus 10 for Missouri there. Quarterback, look, man, I know Lenore Sellers has struggled and missed a half last week. It's possible he won't play great Saturday night again, but he's Lenore Sellers. And so I'm going to give the advantage to South Carolina 51-49, and that's just out of respect for the numbers Bo's put up out there and how well they're operating their offense at this point. Running back with Ahmad Hardy, and they're really deep. 65-35 Missouri, plus 30 for them. The D line, I'm a little more bullish on South Carolina's D line in this game, and I'll get to the matchup there in a second. But D line, obviously, 60-40 Missouri, so 20 points. Linebackers, it kind of depends on how they play, right? For the Gamecocks, I'm gonna go plus 4 for Missouri because when their people are a little skeptical, that makes me a little skeptical. Trotter's had a really big start to the season, who came in from West Virginia. Jeremiah Trotter's brother. Jeremiah Trotter Jr. Jeremiah Trotter Sr. obviously was a big time NFL linebacker. Junior played for Clemson, so you remember him. Secondary, I'm going to go push just because I refuse to believe the struggles back there are going to continue. You have proven players. You know, what needs to be cleaned up? Play the ball, tackle better. I mean, those are fundamental things. And Carolina's obviously well coached back there. Special teams, I'm going to go South Carolina 52-48. The projected starting kicker for Missouri is out for the year, but he's been out all season. They hadn't really had to kick a lot, but they're good in the return game and all that good stuff. Now, the matchups, which I think matters. So, South Carolina D line, O line versus Missouri D line, 82-18 Missouri, percentage wise. So, kind of took a page out of the ESPN FPI as far as how to structure this. This is just my opinion. There's no science involved, no math, and there's no math on this exam, right? South Carolina D line versus Missouri O line. They've had a little concern about that. I mean, it's hard to know because they haven't. I'm not saying South Carolina overall is the D line it was last year, but I think the tackles have played pretty well, especially with Travian Robertson out. Shout out to the coaching staff for picking up the slack there. I'm still concerned about the end opposite Stewart. Obviously, after last season, concerned about what they did with outside zone. But some of these guys, Nick Barrett, Gabriel Brownlow, Dindy, Michael Goodwin, they have to be disruptive. But I think they can be. And Missouri's a little concerned, about that. So I'm going to South Carolina 52-48. South Carolina linebackers versus Missouri running backs, tight ends, even slot receivers that you have to cover sometime, including Nichols and that. Missouri 60-40. And it would be higher, but I've got hope the Gamecocks will rally there. South Carolina secondary and defensive line versus Missouri pass game. Right now, I got to go Missouri 60-40 because teams have been completing passes against the Gamecocks. Missouri quarterback play in general versus South Carolina defense. Got to go Missouri 60-40 based on what's happened. Although, you know, I would not bet on Bo completing as many passes. Hopefully not go out there and complete 60, 70% of his pass, 76% of his passes. South Carolina a quarterback versus Missouri D, South Carolina 60-40. Obviously, Lenore Sellers looks probable. And if he plays, that's good. Obviously, and I'm saying obviously too much. Uh, like Beamer says as well. I didn't notice very many as wells this week. Hats off to Shane Beamer. Not that that ever bothered me. It's kind of a funny thing. Uh, so I'm going 60-40. If it's not Sellers, 80-20 Missouri, but probable is probable, right? South Carolina run game versus Missouri defense based on their defensive line, and nobody's really been able to run on them. Louisiana scratched out 117 yards, but I'm going to go Missouri 65-35. And the Missouri run game versus the South Carolina defense, 146 yards rushing against Vandy. Kind of, like I said, it's the show me states. I got Missouri 55-45 there. As far as the run, like I said, that setting the edge concerns me still in this game. That was an off-season concern, though, and now the concern list has grown, right? It always does, folks. Whew, what a start. Okay, so those are the matchups. Obviously, this game favors Missouri. I said obviously again. I'm gonna pick Missouri to win. I said 31-16 on a video earlier this week, and that's kind of when I thought Lenore's was more of like a 50-50 proposition. So I'm gonna go 31-22. I just think with Missouri clicking right now, it's at home at night. It's like Clemson in the sense they rarely get a home night game, so they come out and howl. All the Tigers have lost home night games too, and this is nothing like going up there. I can assure you of that. But their crowd gets a bad rep, but at night they're a momentum team. They've got momentum. I'm sorry, they're a momentum fan base. Under Eli Drinkwitz, they're not necessarily a momentum team because I've seen games where they get behind and come back. Auburn last year, Carolina last year, even though they lost. Kansas had them down 21-6. That's why South Carolina's got to, if they get up early, you can't, and that's another thing, you got to look out for Mike Shula and the offensive staff and Sellers. They got to keep attacking. You should know from last year, you can't, we talked about Dowell Loggins earlier. That's one of the criticisms I had is, in that game, Carolina gets up 15, and I think they kind of went into a shell and tried to bleed the clock. Like, well, we can run it with Sellers and Sanders and get out of here. And then it's wasn't enough points, obviously, especially when you're attacking downfield with success. Now, do I expect this to happen, like that setup to happen this year? No. I think Carolina can move the ball through the air, but I think it's got to be different because I would be shocked if they send a corner blitz, if they go to zero coverage, if they man up Carolina's receivers and pressure. I think what they're going to feel like in this game is they can get pressure with 4 against South Carolina's offensive line, and they're going to watch that Illinois tape. Teams have not been doing that, by the way, what Illinois did. And they're going to say, all right, Sellers, if you can pick us apart, pick us apart. So That's what my strong prediction is as to how they'll play the Gamecocks. Maybe I'm wrong though, because I kind of thought more teams would do that, but they're not. They're crowding the line of scrimmage and just putting a lot of bodies up there, and Carolina's playing right into their hands because of some of the more restrictive, close kind of things. Although against Vanderbilt, Carolina did spread the field a little better, and I think that's smart too. Whenever you're at a disadvantage with a good D line, spread the field, make quick decisions, get it out quickly. This notion of sitting in the pocket is probably not going to be pretty if that happens, barring a complete miracle. I don't want to say miracle, but a major step forward by the offensive line and in pass protection. Now, yeah, so you got to, and everybody's got to do their job. Offensive line as a whole is getting crucified, and the collective product has not been good. But your center can't roll a snap back there in a tight SEC in any SEC football game. You're going to get beat. I just talked about the parity in the league. I mean, you're going to get beat. I mean, it's going to probably come down to the teams that make the less mistakes. So you can't do things like that. So everybody up front's got to do their job. It can't be like, okay, everybody did their job, but one guy went the wrong way. Well, that's a disaster. Okay. I've seen some offensive lines hold, like not in a long time. Maybe it's high school too. They were not that good at blocking. They would hold hands walking up to the line of scrimmage. Oh, we're not going to let you through. I don't want to see that, but everybody's got to do their job. You can't make mistakes. You can't, if you're a linebacker, you can't get bounced out of a gap. Things like you have to tackle. It's a man's game. You got to play like men, even though these are college age young men. How about that? So yeah, like I said, I can't pick it, but like I tell you guys about predictions, I don't care. I hope I'm wrong. I don't care about my record predicting games, but kind of my theory this year is just pick it as based on what's going in, kind of like the guys in Vegas do. The Missouri's 9.5 point favorite. That sounds about right to me based on the body of work. But as we all know, there's the Beamer bounce back. Normally it happens a little later in the year if things are not going right. But one of the things so many people have said, Beamer said it in a press conference. I got it from a couple of contacts. The clock is ticking. That phrase has been thrown around more specifically about the offense than any. I've never heard the clock is ticking that much. And since Beamer said it publicly, I don't mind telling you that internally it's kind of the same. The clock is ticking. So, and yeah, the clock is ticking. I mean, you go down 2 losses this early with the teams you have left. I'm not saying playoff berth is out the door. Nobody expected them to win 6 straight to end last season. Can they win 8 straight? Absolutely. Now, a lot of things would have to change, and they need some help from some other teams. But the margin for error, the wiggle room, you lose this one, it's out the door. And that's been the goal. I don't think there's anything wrong with establishing that goal. Does it mean if they don't make the playoff but have a good season that it's a failure? Absolutely not. I want to remind everyone of that. But getting a win here, I think, would reset a lot. Plus, you get the trophy, right? Everybody loves a nice trophy. You get to keep it. Keep it in Columbia, South Carolina, which is where I feel like it belongs. People are talking about Missouri staying on the schedule as a permanent opponent because of the Mayor's Cup. And I don't really mind that because, with scheduling and stuff, I just kind of look at historic. I don't look at what's the recent row? They won 5 out of 6. No, get them off. Well, then you may replace them with a program that all of a sudden is up there. Like if Vandy stayed on the schedule, I'd be perfectly fine with it, even after losing the game the other night. Perfectly fine. Missouri on the schedule, perfectly fine. I don't want LSU. Florida and Tennessee are such mixed bags. And I think Tennessee will. I think Tennessee has other teams, Alabama, Vanderbilt, Kentucky, that they're going to get. So I don't know, but they're talking about Missouri staying on. So, if there's a trophy in the game, you want to win it. I guarantee you, Eli Drinkwitz focuses on that every year. All of their trophy games, they have a couple. So yeah, you want to get out there and go get it. And I'm not saying they can't. I'm just not picking it because that's just how I do predictions. But there are scenarios, and look for that matchup. Carolina trying to limit Missouri's D line and taking advantage of some matchups, be it in run game, pass game with the linebackers and secondary. That's kind of the because Missouri's been very impressive. That's kind of the whatever that hole is in the Death Star in Star Wars. That's kind of the path right there. Defensively, you just got to revert to how you can live up to your potential. And then I think I'd be surprised if Clayton White just kind of did the same old thing that he's been trying to do to stop this outside zone based Eli Drinkwitz inspired, executed at a high level offensive attack. All right. It's been a week, folks. Appreciate all of you sticking with me. Don't forget 4-Quarter Friday, the 6th episode of that, to get you ready for high school football all around our great state at 9. Inside the Gamecocks, the preview show follows. Myself, the Mad Dog, JB, Matt Anderson, the late night Gamecock, will join this week. We have Chef Will Turner checking in from sunny Arizona. The recipe this week are skirt steak street tacos. Whew, man, he's had some good stuff. Then after that, we'll go into our final hour with Michael Flint and the man, John Strickland, former Gamecock captain, to talk ball, break it down, give final predictions. It's a 3-hour tour like Gilligan's Island. Then tonight, the South Carolina High School Football Scoreboard Show is around 10 to get you updated on all the scores from across the state. That streams live on the Chief Sports app, as does Sports Talk from 6 to 8. Tomorrow morning, 9:15 Eastern a.m. This time slot's working pretty well. Inside, we'll have the tailgate show with myself and Phil. Final injury report, uniform report. I don't know if we'll get any kind of uniform keys for that. One big thing, one small thing. What's on the menu? More food talk, which is always good. Heading into a great football weekend, and then we'll wrap. And then Rooster Rant comes on Saturday night. That's Mad Dog's filling in for Alex because Alex is out. He'll be traveling back from Mizzou for the BigSpur.com. And then SEC Sunday night to wrap up your weekend. I'll be back with coffee bright and early Monday morning. And that's it. All right, folks. Thanks for hanging in with me this week. We all have hope, right, that things will be better out in Columbia, Missouri. I would call it an unlikely place, but that's why we love college football, right? The most unlikely things going in tend to happen. Y'all take care. Keep praying for Connor Shaw. I could use some prayers as well. Pray for the family of Brandy Mills, who passed away last weekend. Great Gamecock there. And let's go get this win. All right, folks. JC Shurburtt's Coffee.
JC and Mad Dog Bully.